Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Enigmius, and this is Robocraft Early Access coverage. We're on episode 5, and today we're picking up exactly where we left off in the last episode, talking about controlling where damage goes when it's being transferred around within our vehicle. Big heavy shot hits us, destroys blocks, transfers damage from one to the next until it runs out of energy. Can we control where that goes, and if so, is it worth trying? The answer to both is yes. Very quickly, last episode we looked at these two blocks in particular, the prism and the tetra. That's what it's called. I did my homework. It's called the tetra, the outside corner block. And how if you imagine these blocks in a translucent cube, how they would have nothing on two faces for this prism. So we can look right through this prism and see the entire face of each of these cubes, because there's nothing on that face for the prism block. And the same thing over here with the tetra, only it's 3 blocks instead of 2. And that tells us, because of the way the game mechanics work, that if there's no material on the face to transfer damage, it can't transfer damage. So these 2 blocks would not be able to receive damage from this block unless there was a lot of damage to transfer and nowhere else for it to go. Apparently it can jump if it has no other option. But assuming there were other blocks attached to this prism, it would go through those blocks before it would go through either of these 2. And with the tetra, it's the 3 blocks that would be protected from easy damage transfer based on the fact that there's no material on the faces near the block. I can't say connected to because they're not connected, but you get the idea, right? So that's all well and good. We looked at this whole spiral concept just to kind of illustrate how what we're talking about, damage routing and controlling where the damage goes. If you were to take a really big shot on this one corner piece, it would spiral around this way because the way the blocks are oriented, that's the only direction that the damage can flow. Then to further illustrate, we did kind of an exploded view, just kind of put a space in between so you can see how the damage transfers around this way. The difficulty with this design, unfortunately, is that it's very, very finicky, and as you start adjusting the orientation of the blocks so that you can attach other things to them, you start undermining the defensive capability of the whole structure. It could be worse, but if we can come up with something that works a little bit better or that we like a little bit more and works just as well, then that would be a good idea. Now, what I'm going to show you is something that I came up with, but if you have an opportunity to take a look at what other people are doing in terms of how they're aligning their blocks and such to control the spread of damage, by all means take a look, because there's probably more than one way to skin a cat. In this case, knowledge is power, especially in a game like this where it matters how you build your vehicle. So the idea that I came up with is an armor core, similar in concept to the wick idea here, where the damage kind of flows around like that, has to go through many more blocks before it can get here. The armor core is basically the same concept, providing many more blocks that the damage has to go through, but also being completely self-contained and much easier to add things to. Like if you want to add your driver's seat, your wheels, your thrusters, your guns, whatever, it's a lot easier to add to the armor core design than it is to something like this, which is kind of crazy. So the whole basis for the armor core design, we'll look over here, is this shape here. Is basically 2 of these prisms, the wedges, and then 4 of the tetras around the outside. So you get like the top half of a really blocky football kind of thing. And then if you were to flip it over and connect it like so, with just blocks on the underside, this shape here is entirely self-contained. It cannot transfer damage outside of itself. It can transfer damage to any other block within this shape, but based on its shape and the facing of all the blocks in it, it can't transfer damage outside of itself. And of course, that means also it can't be connected to anything. You have to take that risk. You have to make certain parts of the vehicle vulnerable in some way at some point to be able to attach things to them. But just this basic shape as a concept cannot transfer damage outside of itself. Now, that's pretty small and also can't connect anything to it. So if you were to take the bottom half, slide it out 1 block, you get basically this, which is the same basic configuration, obviously, except for the one difference, sliding it apart. But if you look again, this top half can't transfer damage to either side or to either side, and it can't transfer damage up. And the bottom side is basically the same. Can't transfer damage down, can't transfer to either side, can't transfer to either side. And then, of course, we've got these sections here that we can add more of these to, extend the armor core so that we have even more blocks that damage has to transfer through before it can get where we don't want it. Or we can close it off, and we'll look at both immediately, basically. So what I looked at, you can see it kind of hiding in the back there, we'll get to it, is an elongated armor core. Put as many blocks in there as we possibly can to absorb damage. That's their sole purpose, is to absorb damage, and then adjust later on blocks that we need to turn around or whatever so that we can attach things to them. And it starts with a shape like this. If you just want to build a long one instead of building all these little things by halves, you make a shape like this. Very common, actually, in the Triforce, because this by itself is that whole Triforce concept of controlling where the damage is flowing, and it kind of goes up and down in sort of a snaky sort of thing. And then you just add your tetras to the wedges as it makes sense to do so, and very quickly and easily you can see it starts to take on that shape. So this is not complicated. You can look at it, you could say, I completely understand, you can go duplicate it without having to refer back to some diagram, and then finish it by doing the same thing on this side, and you end up with this. Very, very simple armor core design. Now you can see I've closed both ends, and to kind of illustrate, just like when we had over here, when we slid it open or slid it off to the side, we can now transfer damage up this way and down that way. Well, you can close off an end like this, if this is what you end up with, by simply putting, oh, let's keep the tetra for a second, like that. And now, once again, it's a completely self-contained shape. Damage that hits it can go throughout the entire shape, this entire structure, so to speak, but it can't go outside of it. It can't be transferred anywhere else. And then let's say, for example, you want a pilot seat. You could go like this. Not a thing. The vehicle doesn't become any less structurally sound for having this cube there, because the cube is already connecting to things that would have connected to the wedge anyway, only we're providing a flat face that will allow us to place a driver's seat. If you wanted to be picky about it, which sometimes that's exactly what you have to be to make the best vehicle you can go like that. You can put a prism upside down. Now any damage coming this way can't transfer down that way. It's got to work for it. It's got to go around through here and then across and then all over there and then down. Craziness. And put a pilot seat here. If you want to attach wheels, you can go... Actually, that's not exactly the shape that I wanted. Here we go. Is that... No, that's not it. There we go. That's the one. That's... If you want to dangle your wheels in the air like trophies, yeah, stick them up in the air. So now you've got sides that you can attach the wheels to. And again, we haven't really altered the ability of this structure to transfer damage and absorb damage before sending it where we don't want it. Unlike that structure over there, which is much more difficult to do that with. We can basically add whatever we want to this, and more importantly, we can add more of these to a vehicle if we want. If we want to have that ability to absorb just a profound amount of damage, you can stack these guys side by side. You can have one in front of the other. You can do whatever you think you need to do in order to make it work, and it's easy. It's an easy shape. It's an easy structure to build, memorize, and repeat as often as you need it to do. So we can make all the claims in the world as to how well this thing works to absorb damage. The best thing that we can do is take a look at a vehicle that we're going to use that's built around the armor core idea, and then take a look at it as it's getting blown up out in the field. So let's go take a look at the vehicle that I've got running now. It's a little bit more evolved than the one that you'll see in the footage, mostly on account of the electroplates. I've got more electroplates on this one than I do in the other one. But in terms of the actual design, it's pretty much identical. I kind of like the look of it, for one thing. It's relative to the other rail carriages that I've made. This one is extremely low profile, like freakishly low profile, 3 blocks high, low profile. which is very exciting. I like that. I've got a headlamp on the front of this because if you have a headlamp on a vehicle and someone tries to shoot you with a railgun, all they see where your vehicle is a giant blue flare. You can't actually see the vehicle. I've learned this for my own experience using railguns and trying to shoot people who have headlamps like that. So it's actually a defensive thing. And you can see I've got electroplates spreading over the top of the vehicle, help protect a little bit from the plasma cannon kind of bombing. And then this is one of the main ones that I've added that you won't see on the other vehicle. But inside, this is where it matters. You can see we've got the armor core, only in this case, instead of just the prism tetra, I've elongated it a little bit. But the concept is exactly the same. It's still a fully self-contained shape that won't allow the transfer of damage outside of itself. And then from there, it was just a matter of connecting all these other doodads. So I added a little bit of extra blocks here to protect the side of the seat. In fact, when I first built this vehicle, I didn't have these blocks here, and I literally got lit up by some guy with a railgun. He shot the side of my vehicle. Boom, one shot. I was done. I was completely destroyed. So we've protected ourselves with these blocks. And then after, when I had the money, I added these as well. Same concept goes for the wheels. The wheels are attached to the armor core as far away from the driver's seat as I can manage. The weapons are attached to the armor core, all three of them independently to different spots on the armor core, so I can't lose all my weapons at the same time. I did have a vehicle that was prone to that. The weapons themselves, the platforms they're sitting on, using a little bit of triforcing, you can see how I've got these blocks here with the wedge side facing in there, so that a shot that hits that can't go directly to the block that the gun is sitting on. It has to go around the platform because we've got the wedges facing properly to protect ourselves from that kind of spread. And the same goes for the rest of them. The front and the sides are protected from direct spread from the outside into the middle where the guns sit. And then up front, just kind of building up things because we had our seat more or less exposed. I decided to add a few things in front to protect it as well. And this front bumper, if you want to call it, these teal colored blocks are, again, they're connected to the armor core, but not in the same way as this guy here. So you can blow off the bumper and it would have to go through a lot of blocks in the armor core to get to the seat. So that's the Fat Rat, which is the name of the last vehicle that was in here. This one doesn't have a name yet. I really like the way, like I say, the way it looks. It also drives and performs quite well for what it is. So let's go take a look at the matches where we actually put all this into use. Now, just to be clear, before anyone gets upset, the purpose here is not to kind of demonstrate any supreme tactical awareness. We're just watching to see how our vehicle gets blown to pieces, to see if this whole armor core concept actually works. This is actually a fairly decent angle to view this vehicle from because you can kind of see underneath those top two electroplates and see there's really not a whole lot to this vehicle. It's very much a glass cannon kind of build. It's more about presenting a low profile and not really taking the brunt of things whenever possible. Unfortunately, I have the unfortunate tendency to overextend. And then I look around and my teammates are everywhere but where I am. It tends to make for kind of a difficult spot. Now you can see here we've got this little wee cart that's covered in plasma cannons. He kind of drives under me and he's just wailing away. But you see that last little piece of me to survive? That was the armor core. And it was pretty uniform in the way that it fell apart, which is kind of good. That's one of the indicators that it's working, is that it's absorbing the damage uniformly as it's working its way back to the driver's seat, as opposed to just really jagged, nasty-looking pieces. So even though that was an abysmal failure, I'm still calling it a success because it's getting closer to proof of concept with the armor core idea. Now this one's going to take a little bit longer to get busted up a little bit. I went through a number of different matches trying to find ones that would illustrate the concept without dragging on for too long. And this is one of the ones that I found where I was doing what I intend to do when I come in here. I'm kind of hiding behind this little hill leading up to that central area where people like to fight and blow each other up when they've got the kinds of vehicles that are suited to that. In this case, again, focusing on the flying guys. And if I had any teammates nearby, I would be keeping an eye on their situation as well to see if they needed a little bit of fire support. You can see my team is pretty much all over here. So I come over here to see if there are any targets of opportunity that I can help them with and get a few, you know, dangerous shots onto those targets that whittle them down faster than the driver expected would happen. But then we get onto the ice, and the ice is ice. It kind of has its own physics that may or may not make sense. I haven't sat down and tried to figure it out. I just know I avoid it whenever possible. Ice is what makes this map such a great map for hovercraft. It's really what it comes down to. You can see all I'm trying to do is turn around because the enemy has started to capture our base. And that's unfortunately another one of those situational awareness things, recognizing that it's happening and then doing something about it. If your team doesn't respond appropriately, me going back by myself, maybe not the best plan, but if someone doesn't do it, we're guaranteed to lose because you can see they've got 2 guys over there capturing our base. I've been spotted, and all of a sudden someone is sneaking up on me from behind, and this is a pretty good demonstration of how this thing collapses when it decides it's finally going to go. You see it's piece by piece, and there's the armor core underneath the driver's seat. Now granted, he can't shoot it from there, but I'm taking fire from more than one direction, and again, you can see the armor core is sort of uniformly destroyed. Take it for what you will. I think we need to do a little more testing. That's what I'm going to be doing over the next couple of days, is messing around with it, messing around with different configurations, and seeing again if I can capture any matches where it shows fairly well what it looks like when the vehicle degrades. But as far as it goes, having that core absorbing damage and being able to connect to it very, very easily without feeling like you're weakening it is really, really neat, and it's something that could turn into a very useful kind of thing that I'll be using on a regular basis. So I'll be highlighting it some more in the next episode. If you want to be notified when I add that episode, the easiest way to do that is always to subscribe to my channel or follow me on the social media. Links for the social media are in the information section below the video. Please do leave your comments and feedback. They're important. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.